The mysterious encounter, it all began on a night when the sky stretched endlessly above, the darkness pierced only by the soft, shimmering light of countless stars. Lynn, an ordinary girl living in the heart of a bustling city, had spent her day dealing with the usual hustle and bustle of urban life. After a long shift at work, she finally found herself heading home, looking forward to the quiet solitude of her apartment. The road ahead was familiar, the turns and intersections ingrained in her memory, and the steady hum of her car's engine was a comfort. It was a peaceful drive, the kind where your thoughts wander, and the world outside fades into the background, but tonight felt different. The cool breeze through the open windows carried a sense of unease, a strange tension in the air. Lynn couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, though she couldn't put her finger on it. The empty stretches of highway seemed to stretch on forever, and the darkness of the road seemed thicker, more encompassing, than usual. Her headlights cut through the night, but the feeling of being watched lingered at the edges of her mind, unshakable, and then, as if the night had decided to answer her subconscious fears, her car sputtered. The smooth hum of the engine faltered, and with a sudden jerk, the vehicle came to a stop. Confused, Lynn attempted to restart the engine, but it was no use. The car was dead. She glanced around, noting that she was in the middle of nowhere, no streetlights, no buildings, just the open road and the quiet dark. Her phone had no signal, and the isolation of the moment began to settle over her like a heavy blanket. A chill ran down her spine. Pulling herself together, Lynn decided to get out of the car and figure out what was wrong. But as she stepped onto the empty road, a flash of brilliant light appeared in the sky. It was sudden and intense, lighting up the entire horizon. For a moment, Lynn thought it was lightning, but the light was too steady, too focused. It didn't flicker, and it didn't fade. Instead, it grew brighter, larger, expanding in a way that defied natural explanation. Her heart began to race, her pulse quickening in her throat as she stared in awe at the phenomenon. The light seemed to pulse, like it was alive, almost beckoning her. It grew so intense that she had to shield her eyes, but just as quickly as it appeared, the light began to descend toward the ground. At first, Lynn thought it might be some kind of meteor, but the shape that was forming before her eyes made no sense. It was far too controlled, far too graceful. As the object neared the ground, the blinding light softened, revealing a craft, sleek, metallic, and unlike anything Lynn had ever seen. It hovered a few feet above the earth, glowing with an ethereal radiance that made the surrounding night seem dull in comparison. It was smooth, almost liquid in its form, and it seemed to pulse with energy. Lynn's breath caught in her chest, her mind scrambling to make sense of what she was seeing. Was it a dream? Was she hallucinating? But the steady hum of the craft, the cold night air on her skin, and the pounding of her heart were all too real. And then, slowly, as if sensing her presence, a figure stepped out from the craft. At first, Lynn thought her eyes were deceiving her. The figure was humanoid, but the details were all wrong. His height was unnerving, his skin luminous and pale, and his long silver hair cascaded down his back in waves that seemed to shimmer under the stars. It wasn't just hair, it looked like liquid metal, flowing and shifting with an otherworldly glow. His features were sharp and delicate, almost too perfect, as though carved from some celestial material. But it was his eyes that truly captivated her, eyes that glowed with a soft, mesmerizing light, like twin stars in a boundless universe. They were ancient and knowing. And when they met hers, Lynn felt an overwhelming sense of recognition, as though this encounter was no coincidence, as though she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. The world seemed to fall silent around them, the air thick with anticipation. Lynn's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing to comprehend what was happening. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. It was as if her very breath was stolen by the presence of this being before her. He didn't speak either. Instead, he simply watched her, his gaze piercing yet calm, as if studying her in the same way she was studying him. Every inch of her body screamed to run, to flee from the impossible. But something inside her, something deeper, compelled her to stay. There was no fear in his eyes, only an understanding, as if he knew something she didn't, something about her, something about the universe. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The silence stretched on, filled with 1,000 unspoken thoughts and questions. Lin felt as though she were standing on the edge of something vast and incomprehensible, something beyond her understanding. She wanted to turn away, to pretend this wasn't happening, but she couldn't. Her gaze locked with his, and in that moment, she understood. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was destiny. The alien before her stepped forward, moving with a grace that seemed too fluid, too effortless for a human. His presence was magnetic, drawing her in like a moth to a flame. Yet, despite the overwhelming strangeness of the situation, Lin didn't feel afraid. There was a calmness, a quiet serenity in his aura that seemed to wash over her. Who are you? Lin finally managed to whisper, her voice trembling. The alien tilted his head slightly, as if contemplating her question. A soft hum emanated from his device, and then, in a voice that was both soothing and strange, he spoke, "I am Xyler, from a world far beyond yours." Discovering a new world, as the days passed, Lin and Xyler slowly found a way to communicate. At first, their conversations were disjointed, filled with awkward silences and moments of confusion. Xyler, though not able to speak the human language fluently, carried a small device that translated his thoughts into words she could understand. The device was unlike anything Lin had ever seen before, sleek, transparent, with a soft, pulsating glow that seemed to sync with Xyler's own presence. When he spoke through it, his voice was calm and measured, though laced with an unfamiliar cadence that felt almost melodic. "Thank you, for understanding," Xyler had said the first time he used the device. His voice smoother than Lin had imagined. His words were strangely comforting, though there was a distance in his tone, as if he were still learning how to navigate this strange, new world. Over time, Xyler began to share more about himself and his origins. He told Lin that he came from a planet called Eldoria, a place far beyond the reaches of Earth. Its skies were violet, and its landscapes were covered with vast fields of crystal-like structures that shimmered under twin suns. Xyler explained that life on Eldoria had evolved in ways unimaginable to humans, where physical and mental abilities were heightened and intelligence surpassed what human beings could fathom. His species had mastered not just space travel, but also communication through energy, bypassing the need for spoken language altogether. His mission on Earth was scientific, to observe and study human beings from a distance. His people, the Eldorians, had been observing Earth for centuries, fascinated by the complexity of human emotions, relationships, and the ways in which humans navigated the world. They had learned much about Earth's history, but the true mysteries lay in understanding the hearts of its inhabitants, their passions, struggles, and the intricate web of connections between them. But as Xyler spent more time with Lin, something unexpected happened. The connection between them deepened, surpassing the boundaries of a simple study. Lin, who had always been curious and open-minded, found herself drawn to him, not as an alien. Not as a being from another world, but as a person, a soul who shared her own desires, hopes, and doubts. Despite the obvious physical differences, there was something eerily familiar in Xyler's eyes, something that made her feel as if they had known each other for a lifetime. "I never thought I would meet someone like you," Lin confessed one night, as they sat on a hill, watching the city lights sparkle in the distance. The soft hum of the alien ship behind them seemed like a distant memory, as their small world narrowed to the space between them. Xyler's gaze softened, his eyes reflecting the stars above. "I never expected to find someone like you, either. You are different from the others I've observed," he said, his words carrying a weight that Lin couldn't ignore. In the silence that followed, Lin realized that the connection between them wasn't just a strange twist of fate, it was something much deeper, something that neither of them fully understood yet. They had come to each other, not by chance, but because they were meant to find one another. A bridge had formed between their worlds, one that neither distance nor time could break. The growing bond, days turned into weeks, and the bond between Lin and Xyler grew stronger with each passing moment. They began to share more about themselves, and in doing so, they built a fragile yet undeniable connection that seemed to defy reason. Xyler, who had once viewed humans only as objects of study, was now genuinely fascinated by the complexities of Lin's emotions and thoughts. He marveled at the depth of human experience, how joy could be so fleeting, how sorrow could feel so heavy, and how love, despite its fleeting nature, could make the entire world seem more alive. Lin, in turn, found herself captivated by Xyler's perspective. His vast knowledge of the universe, of galaxies, civilizations, and the intricate dance of time and space, was nothing short of awe-inspiring. Yet, it wasn't just his intellect that drew her in. It was his unwavering kindness, his quiet empathy, and his genuine desire to understand her. Despite coming from a place so far removed from her own world, Xyler had a depth of understanding and emotional intelligence that most people on Earth would never achieve. One afternoon, Xyler took Lin on a journey to the outskirts of the city, to a quiet forest that he had found. It was one of the few places on Earth where he felt he could truly connect to nature, away from the noise and chaos of human life. They sat together beneath the ancient trees. And Xyler shared stories of his planet's past, of the Eldorians' rise to power, of their advances in technology, and their efforts to maintain peace across the galaxies. But what fascinated Lin the most was the way he spoke of his people's philosophy, their belief that true growth came from understanding not just the universe around them, but the emotions that connected all living things. Lin, in turn, taught Xyler about the beauty of human relationships, how love, in all its forms, could heal even the deepest wounds. She told him about her life, her family, and her dreams. And in those quiet moments, as they shared pieces of their worlds with one another, they discovered that despite the vastness of the universe, their hearts beat with the same rhythm, their hopes intertwined in ways they had never expected, their bond grew more than just an intellectual connection. It became a deep emotional tether, something that went beyond words or logic. They found comfort in one another's company, solace in the silence between them, and strength in the quiet understanding they shared. Despite the obvious differences between their worlds, Lin and Xyler began to realize that their relationship wasn't just an improbable meeting of two distant species, it was the beginning of something far greater. A love that defied the very laws of the universe, a connection that spoke to something deeper than science or logic. They were no longer just a human and an alien, they were two souls, united by a force that transcended space and time, and though neither of them fully understood what the future held, they knew one thing for certain: their worlds had collided for a reason. They had come together, not out of coincidence, but because they were meant to be. The first spark of love, it was a warm evening, the kind where the sky seemed to stretch forever, painted with shades of purple, pink, and gold as the sun slowly dipped below the horizon. Lin and Xyler sat together in the quiet of a secluded park, watching the last rays of the day slip away, leaving only the soft glow of the evening stars. The air was calm, and the world felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As the minutes passed, Xyler turned toward her, his eyes glowing softly in the dimming light. He had been so different from anyone Lin had ever met, his mannerisms, his language, the way he viewed the world, but tonight, he felt more human than alien. There was an intimacy in the way they sat together, the silent understanding between them that made the distance of their world seem irrelevant. Xyler, ever the observer, had learned so much about Earth and its inhabitants, but tonight, he seemed different, more present, more attuned to the subtle things that made life beautiful. Without a word, Xyler reached out and took Lin's hand. It was gentle at first, his fingers hesitating as though unsure of the gesture. Lin's breath caught in her chest as his cool skin brushed against hers. She had never imagined that the touch of an alien could feel so human. His hand was soft, but there was a strange warmth that radiated from it. As though he had been waiting to feel something like this for a long time. The moment his fingers closed around hers, a spark seemed to ignite between them. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, a wave of recognition that seemed to run deeper than both of them. Lin had always been cautious about her emotions, unsure about opening her heart to someone who wasn't even from her world. She had been hesitant, worried about the impossibility of a relationship with someone so different, so distant from everything she knew. But now, with his hand in hers, all of that uncertainty seemed to melt away. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring them together, and the moment was too perfect to ignore. She felt something stir within her, a warmth, a pull toward him that was undeniable. Despite everything that set them apart, in this moment, they were just two souls connected in a way that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. Lin realized, with a sudden clarity, that she had developed feelings for Xyler, feelings that were deeper than friendship, more complex than mere curiosity. She had fallen for him, for his quiet strength, for the kindness in his eyes, for the way he saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had. It wasn't just his appearance, his alien nature, it was him, the person he was, who had touched something inside her that she hadn't known was there. Xyler, sensing the shift in her, gave her hand a gentle squeeze, his eyes locked with hers in an unspoken exchange. In that moment, neither of them needed words. They simply understood. The first spark of love had ignited between them, and nothing in the universe could erase it. The conflict within, as the days passed, the connection between Lin and Xyler grew, becoming more intense, more undeniable. But with that closeness came an unsettling reality that neither of them could ignore. Lin had tried to push it aside, to convince herself that their relationship, no matter how deep it seemed, was doomed from the start. He was from another planet, and eventually, he would have to return to his people. The thought of losing him was unbearable, but she knew it was inevitable. The weight of their differences pressed heavily on her heart. How could she possibly be in love with someone who wasn't even from her world? Someone who had come to Earth for a mission, not for love. She wondered if Xyler felt the same conflict, the same impossibility. They couldn't have a future together. The very nature of their relationship, of their bond, was bound by the laws of the universe itself. Earth and Eldoria were separated by more than just distance, they were separated by an infinite divide. Xyler, too, struggled with the growing feelings he had for Lin. His mission was to observe, to learn about humanity, not to fall in love. His people had warned him of the dangers of becoming too attached to Earth's inhabitants, of getting too close to their emotions. But no matter how much he tried to distance himself, no matter how much he reminded himself of the reason he was here, he couldn't help the way he felt about her. Every moment spent with Lin made the thought of leaving her more painful. He had never anticipated this. His mission was supposed to be about knowledge, not attachment. And yet, every time they spoke, every time their eyes met, he felt as though his heart, if he could even call it that, was being pulled in directions he had never known existed. The thought of leaving her, of returning to Eldoria without her, broke something inside him. He didn't want to leave her, but he didn't see how their love could survive the chasm between their worlds. A revelation from Xyler. One night, as they sat together in the quiet of the park, Xyler finally spoke the words that had been weighing on his mind for weeks. His voice was filled with a strange, quiet urgency, a tension that Lin hadn't heard before. "I was not just sent here to observe," he began, his gaze distant as though he were searching for the right words. "I was chosen. My people, they knew about you long before I ever arrived on Earth. Our destinies, Lin, are tied together in ways that neither of us can fully understand." Lin's heart skipped a beat, and she felt a surge of confusion and curiosity flood her. "What do you mean? Chosen for what?" Xyler took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of sadness and determination. "The Eldorians have foreseen that our meeting would be pivotal. It is not by chance that we have found one another. Your existence and mine are part of a greater plan, one that could change the future of both of our worlds. Our union, this connection we share, holds the key to something far greater than we can imagine. It could alter the course of history for both Earth and Eldoria." Lin felt as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted. She had always thought that their connection was something personal, something that had grown between them naturally. But now, it seemed there was something far more significant at play. This wasn't just about them. Their love, this impossible love, was intertwined with the fate of entire worlds. The revelation hit Lynn harder than she could have ever imagined. She had known that their love was unusual, but now she realized that it wasn't just their hearts that were at stake, it was the future itself. The weight of this knowledge both frightened and exhilarated her. Xylar's words echoed in her mind, "Our destinies are intertwined." The knowledge brought them closer, but it also raised the stakes of their relationship. If they chose to be together, they would not only be defying the laws of space and time, they would be altering the course of the universe itself. As the gravity of Xylar's revelation settled over them, the bond between them grew even deeper. They had crossed a line they could never return from. And yet, neither of them could bring themselves to regret it. They had no choice but to face the future together, whatever that future might hold. The crisis. It was an ordinary evening when the crisis arrived, shattering the fragile peace that Lynn and Xylar had built. The city was quiet, the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights, and Lynn had just finished work. She had spent the day with Xylar, sharing moments that seemed to blur the lines between their two worlds. Their connection had never felt more certain. She had even dared to dream, for a brief moment, that their love might transcend the impossible barriers between them, but that night, as Lynn walked home, everything changed. She arrived at her apartment to find her phone flashing with a series of missed calls and messages. The strange, urgent feeling in her chest grew as she opened the messages. Most of them from Xylar. Her fingers trembled as she read his words, "They've come for me. I need to explain. Meet me at the park." Lynn's heart raced. She had never seen Xylar so desperate, so fearful. She hurried to the park, the path ahead blurring as her mind raced through the possibilities. The moment she stepped into the familiar clearing where they had often spent time together, she saw him. Xylar was standing alone under a large oak tree, his usually calm demeanor now shadowed with tension. His eyes were wide, filled with both urgency and sadness. Before she could speak, a voice echoed from behind her, cold and mechanical. "Xylar," the voice said. It wasn't human. Lynn turned. Her breath catching as she saw them, figures emerging from the shadows, their alien forms unmistakable. Tall, their skin darker than night, with eyes that glowed an eerie, unnatural hue. These were no ordinary beings, they were from his world, sent to bring him back. They stood in a line, their expressions unreadable, their presence overwhelming. Lynn could feel the weight of their gaze, cold and accusatory. They didn't seem surprised to see her, but their attention quickly turned to her hand, still intertwined with Xylar's. "Your mission is complete, Xylar," the leader of the group spoke, his voice flat and unwavering. "Return with us now. You've violated protocol. This attachment to a human, this relationship, is a threat to the mission's integrity. It is an anomaly that cannot be allowed to continue." Lynn's heart sank. The words felt like a blow to her chest. She looked at Xylar, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. His gaze was fixed on the ground, his jaw clenched in pain. She could see the inner turmoil on his face, the conflict that had torn him apart for so long now coming to a head. I never intended for this to happen," Xylar finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "But I cannot go back with you. Not without her." The alien forces exchanged looks, their expressions unreadable, but there was no doubt in their stance. This was not up for negotiation. The leader's eyes glowed a menacing red as he stepped forward. "You are not permitted to choose, Xylar. The mission was always clear. You must return. This, human, is not part of the plan. She is a distraction. A dangerous one." Lynn's pulse quickened as the weight of their words sank in. She turned to Xylar, her mind racing. She knew he had always known that this moment might come, the moment when his mission and his emotions would collide. But seeing him torn apart in front of her, seeing the conflict in his eyes, made it all too real. "I won't leave you," she said, her voice trembling. "I won't let them take you away." Xylar's face softened as he met her gaze. His hand tightened around hers, but there was a sadness in his eyes that made her heart ache. "I have to, Lin," he whispered. "I don't have a choice. I came here to observe. To understand. But now I've learned more than I ever thought possible. And it's because of you. I can't ignore what I feel for you, but my people, my mission, they won't allow it. They can't understand." Lin's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. This was everything they had been trying to avoid, the moment when love collided with duty, with fate. There was no easy answer, no path forward that didn't involve sacrificing something monumental. She looked at the alien forces, who stood silently behind their leader, waiting for Zyler's decision. The tension in the air was suffocating. "What happens if you refuse?" she asked, her voice shaky but strong. The leader's lips curled into a cold smile. "Refuse, and you will both face the consequences. The Eldorian Council will not stand for such disobedience. You will be brought back for re-education, and Earth will be left to continue on its path, unaware. Unprepared for the consequences of your actions." The words hit like a physical blow. Lin's thoughts scattered. There was no question that their love, their bond, was putting both their lives at risk. And now, Zyler was faced with an impossible choice: return to his planet, to fulfill his mission and save both of their worlds, or stay and defy the very laws that had governed his existence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lin's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to comprehend the magnitude of what was unfolding. She knew what was at stake: Earth, Zyler's people, their relationship, their very future. There was no simple answer. They could defy the laws of the universe. Risk everything for their love, but the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for them, but for the entire planet. "Please," she whispered, her voice filled with desperation. "Don't go. I don't care about the universe. I care about you." Zyler's face twisted with agony, torn between the love he had for her and the duty he had to his people. He turned to face the alien forces, his decision hanging in the balance. Lin knew that no matter what happened, their lives were about to change forever. "Zyler," she said softly, "whatever happens, we face it together. But you must decide. We must choose." Zyler's voice broke as he spoke the words that would define their future. "I choose you, Lin. But I won't do it at the cost of everything else. I'll find another way. I promise." And so, as the alien forces prepared to take him away, Lin and Zyler found themselves standing at the precipice of a decision that would change everything, for them, for their love, and for the future of two worlds. A moment of sacrifice, the weight of the moment pressed down on Lin like 1,000 tons. She could see the pain in Zyler's eyes, his heart torn in two as the alien forces loomed ever closer, waiting for his decision. He had promised to find another way, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. The universe was watching. The Eldorians, his people, had come for him, and no matter how much he wanted to stay by her side, he knew that he had a duty, one that was far larger than the love they shared. Lin's heart ached, her chest tightening with a pain she couldn't describe. Every instinct screamed at her to hold on, to beg him not to go. But deep down, she knew she couldn't be selfish. The balance of the universe, the fate of his people, and the future of Earth depended on his actions. She understood now, his purpose wasn't just to observe, it was to protect. Zyler's presence was vital to the very fabric of existence. If he remained on Earth, it would alter the course of history, a ripple that could tear apart the very world they had worked so hard to protect. With tears streaming down her face, Lin reached out to touch Zyler's cheek. "You have to go," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I love you, but you must fulfill your mission. You have a responsibility to the universe. You can't let them down." Zyler shook his head, his voice breaking. "Lin. I can't leave you. I can't imagine a life without you." Her heart shattered as she forced herself to meet his eyes, her hands trembling as they held onto his. "You have to, Zyler. The universe is bigger than us. I can't ask you to choose me over everything else. You've always been more than this moment, you are a part of something bigger. Don't let your people down. Don't let the universe crumble because of us. Xyler's face twisted in anguish. His whole being was conflicted, the love for her warring with the duty he had to his people. His hands tightened around hers, but deep down, he knew she was right. His place was not on Earth, it was with the Eldorians, guiding them, ensuring their future. He had been sent for a purpose, and now that purpose was calling him home. I will never forget you, Lin, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. No matter where I go, no matter what happens, I will carry you with me, in my heart. Lin smiled through her tears, her chest heavy with the knowledge that this was the right thing to do, even though it felt like the hardest thing she would ever face. And I will never forget you. No matter how many years pass, no matter where life takes me, you will always be a part of me. Their lips met for one last, lingering kiss, tender, desperate, filled with everything they could not say aloud. It was a promise, a love unspoken, that neither of them would ever truly leave behind. But as the alien forces drew closer, Lin pulled away, stepping back. Go, Xyler. Go and save your people, she said, her voice trembling with the weight of her decision. Xyler hesitated for a moment longer, his eyes locking with hers, searching for something, anything, that would allow him to stay. But there was nothing left to say. With a final, heart-wrenching glance, he turned away and walked toward the waiting forces, leaving Lin standing alone under the vast, indifferent sky. A twist of fate, years passed, and the emptiness left behind by Xyler's departure never truly faded. Lin tried to move on. She buried herself in her work, in her friendships, in the mundane routines of life. But there were moments, small and fleeting, when she would look up at the stars and wonder about him. Wonder if he still thought of her, if he still carried the memory of their love. And in those quiet, lonely moments, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something was off about the way things had ended. The world had gone on, just as it always did. Earth remained blissfully unaware of the larger forces at play. But Lin knew in her heart that something wasn't right. There had been no word from Xyler. No sign. No reassurance that the universe was safe. And yet, deep down, she could feel that something had shifted. Then, one day, a chilling discovery shattered everything Lin thought she knew. It started as a whisper, a strange occurrence she couldn't explain. First, it was small things, subtle glitches in the news, whispers of strange events happening around the globe. Unusual activities on the fringes of society, anomalies in the atmosphere that couldn't be easily explained. A growing unease had begun to spread, but Lin had dismissed it, thinking it was simply her imagination running wild. After all, it had been years since Xyler had left. But then she found it. While doing some research on an unrelated project, Lin stumbled across a series of encrypted transmissions that had been intercepted by various global agencies. The messages were unclear, cryptic, and most of them seemed to come from Xyler. They were short, fragmented bursts of information, odd symbols, encoded phrases, and coordinates that Lin couldn't decipher at first. But one thing was clear, these messages were coming from him, from the same device Xyler had once used to communicate with her. Her heart stopped as she realized the significance. Xyler hadn't returned to Eldoria. He hadn't been sent back to continue his mission as he had told her. No. He had stayed on Earth, watching from the shadows, trying to warn her about something far worse than she had ever imagined. The messages were frantic, filled with a sense of urgency. They spoke of a growing threat, an impending invasion, one that was being prepared by the very forces that had taken him away. Xyler had been trying to contact her, trying to warn her of the Eldorian forces' true intentions. They hadn't returned to Eldoria after all, they had stayed on Earth, laying the groundwork for an invasion, an occupation. Earth wasn't a protected planet, it was a target. The realization hit Lin like a thunderclap. Xyler hadn't left her because of duty, he had left because he had been forced to abandon his mission. And now, the very people he had once worked for were coming to invade Earth. she felt the ground shift beneath her. The world she had known, the life she had tried to rebuild, was about to be changed forever. And Xyler, the man she had once loved and lost, was the only one who could help stop it, but now, he was no longer the observer, he was the key to saving Earth from destruction. Lynn knew what she had to do. She would find Xyler, wherever he was, and together, they would face the storm that was coming. The past had never truly let go of them, and now the future depended on the very love they had once fought to protect. The final battle and reunion, the world stood on the precipice of destruction. Lynn had spent months tracking down the clues Xyler had left behind, piecing together the message he had desperately tried to send. The alien forces had not only stayed on Earth, they had been orchestrating an invasion. A force unlike anything Earth had ever seen, with advanced technology capable of overwhelming the planet. But there was something Lynn now knew with absolute certainty: Xyler had always been more than just an observer. He was the key to stopping the invasion, and together, they were the universe's last hope. Lynn didn't hesitate for a second. She followed every lead, every whisper that brought her closer to finding Xyler. Her heart beat with an intensity she couldn't explain. She hadn't realized it at the time, but her love for him had always been part of something far greater, something that transcended the boundaries of her world. The connection they shared wasn't just about two people finding each other, it was about two worlds, two forces, coming together to alter the fate of the universe itself. It wasn't long before Lynn tracked down the location where Xyler had been hiding. A remote compound on the outskirts of the city, hidden beneath layers of technological camouflage. When she arrived, she found him, Xyler, standing at the entrance, as if he had been waiting for her all along. His once silver hair was streaked with dark lines. His eyes tired, but there was a light in them when they met hers, a light of recognition, of love, of everything they had been through. Xyler, Lynn whispered, barely able to contain the overwhelming flood of emotion that surged through her. Lynn, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with the weight of everything they had endured. I thought I had lost you forever. Tears welled in her eyes as she ran to him, their embrace intense, a moment of raw emotion where the years apart seemed to melt away. The chaos, the impending invasion, the galaxy-spanning forces at play, they all seemed irrelevant in that moment. There was only them. I never stopped thinking about you, Lynn said, her voice shaking. I thought I had lost you too. Xyler cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. But we found each other again. And together, we can stop this. It was then that Lynn understood the true gravity of the situation. The alien forces weren't just here to invade, they were here to enslave. They had been planning Earth's downfall for years. Manipulating events from the shadows, positioning themselves to take control. But now, with Xyler by her side, Lynn felt a surge of determination. Their love wasn't just a personal connection, it was the very force that could disrupt the alien plot. Together, they would fight, and together, they would rewrite the fate of the universe. Underscore 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 underscore. The final battle was fierce, as Xyler and Lynn led a small group of resistance fighters against the alien forces that had infiltrated Earth. The skies above the city crackled with energy as advanced alien ships hovered, unleashing devastating firepower. But Xyler, with his knowledge of their technology, and Lynn, with her unyielding will, managed to turn the tide. They fought side by side, each movement a testament to the bond they had formed. Xyler's alien abilities and his deep understanding of the invaders' technology combined with Lynn's human ingenuity and her fierce, unrelenting love for him. As they navigated through the chaos of the battlefield, their connection became a beacon, a guiding light in the darkness. Every time their hands touched, every glance shared, it was as though the universe itself recognized the force they had created together. At the heart of the battle, in the center of the enemy's command structure, Lin and Xyler faced the leader of the alien forces, the one who had orchestrated the invasion from the start. He was cold, calculating, and without remorse, but when he saw the bond between Xyler and Lin, something shifted. He had never anticipated the power of their connection, and it was that very love that disarmed him. This is impossible, the leader said, his voice filled with disbelief as he watched the unity between them. How could this human emotion, this bond, be so powerful? Xyler stood tall, his eyes glowing with determination. You've underestimated the power of love, he said, his voice steady, unwavering. Love transcends everything, distance, time, and even space itself. In a final act of defiance, Lin and Xyler combined their strength. With the energy of their bond fueling them, they struck the leader down, disabling the alien technology that had threatened Earth. The invasion was over. The forces that had come to conquer Earth were now scattered, their mission defeated by the love that had united two worlds. In the aftermath, as the world began to rebuild, Lin and Xyler stood together, the city now at peace. There would be no more separation, no more fear of what was to come. They had fought for each other and for the future, and now they would face whatever came next, hand in hand. We did it, Lin said, her voice full of quiet triumph as she looked up at the stars. Xyler smiled, his eyes softening as he turned to her. We did it, together. And in that moment, they both knew that their love was no longer just a fleeting moment or a passing connection, it was the very force that had saved their worlds. A love that had defied the boundaries of space, time, and destiny itself. Together, they had changed the course of the universe. And now, they would live their lives as one, united, against all odds.